Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dalaran, and in today's video, I'll be going over what rogues do in Mythic Plus dungeons. This is going to be a class guide rather than a spec guide. And in this video, we'll be covering two of the more prominent specs that you should be playing in Mythic Plus when it comes to your rogue. We're going to go over talents, a little bit about rotation, what type of gear do you need, but for the most part, this is going to be a cover of everything that has been known already. So, if you guys do need to, first of all, go check out some kind of a base PvE guide for Assassination or Outlaw first. You might want to check in the comments down below, because I'll have a link for you to go and check out to get the basics out of the way. So let's first start. You are going to be playing between Assassin and Outlaw. Subtlety right now is not that great for PvE content, and it doesn't have that strong damage in Mythic Pluses unless you have an insane amount of gear. So it's best to stick for the most viable output with Outlaw and Assassination, depending on the week and depending on your personal playstyle. First, I want to go over the talents you'll be running, whether you want to play one spec or the other. We're going to start with Assassination. In the first row, you're always going to take Elaborate Planning. In the second row, you should be rolling Subterfuge, because we'll be going for a build where you can open up and garrote multiple enemies. Now, Subterfuge on its own lets you do that. You will be able to, let's say, garrote 3 enemies in a row, or 4 enemies if you decide to get a 4th garrote. That's not going to be buffed by Subterfuge. But that allows Assassination a little bit beefier openers, and it opens up a lot of traits that you can play with, and it just synergizes super well in Mythic Pluses, whether you're doing like a 2-target cleave, 3 targets, massive AoE damage, or trying to nuke a single person down. You want to have that versatility in Mythic Plus dungeons, so Subterfuge is going to be the best. Level 45, Vigor is the only viable option right now for Assass. There is some room to talk about Mark for Death, but for the most part, I'd say just go Vigor. It's going to be the best choice when it comes to AoE or single target. A level 60 cheat death is going to be the way to go for every spec, so that will also apply to Outlaw, because it's nice to have that kind of safety net. If, let's say, a mechanic goes off or somebody makes a mistake when you're first learning how to do some of the keys, it's good to be able to have a second try at it. Elusiveness is really hard sometimes to really line up perfectly unless you're experienced. Legion Poison Heal, you really shouldn't be worried too much about self-heal. If you are having to worry about self-heal, then maybe at that point it's good to find another healer. Level 75, it's your utility tree. This one doesn't really get too much use. You're not going to be able to use this on bosses. You do have internal bleeding, where if you do kidney an enemy, you'll also put a damage over time on them. This one became a lot more useful in this new seasonal affix Beguiling, where you can actually stun these mobs and being able to pump out a little bit more damage on them. Internal bleeding isn't terrible. Prayer in the Weak, however, can also be really good. If you stun an enemy, everybody in your group does more damage, and if you have really good focus DPS on whoever you stun, this could give you a window of opportunity. But because Assassination mostly opens up with garrote, you really want to play with Iron Wire. It increases your silence duration by extra 3 seconds, so it can be really good against caster packs, and enemies that you hit with garrote in the opener give your tank a little bit of a time and your healer to set up, because those enemies will deal 15% less damage for 8 seconds. Does not work on bosses, so that you won't be able to like vanish garrote a certain ability from a boss to reduce its output. At level 90, it really comes down to between Sanguinate and Toxic Blade. If you are running a triple shrouded suffocation build, some of you guys might want to use that for gear, some of you might not want to do that for gear. It all depends. Exsanguinate can be very, very powerful, but Toxic Blade has a fairly short cooldown, and it's very consistent because of the way the Beguiling is. You want a lot of focused DPS sometimes for certain boss fights, and Toxic Blade can really synergize well in very heavy poison related groups. Since this Beguiling affix isn't really about big AoE damage like Reaping was, there is a focused target. This one is really going to come down to what is your personal favorite. Exsanguinate definitely has a burst output if you need to nuke that enemy, but a lot of rogues might even want to go for different traits in order to make Toxic Blade more powerful, because you're simply just going to be dumping a lot of your AoE traits for more pure single target and being that key killer of Beguiling as well as bosses within Mythic Plus dungeons. So if you're not sure, Toxic Blade is the way to go. If you want to play a bursty build and you have triple shrouded and the right stats for it, Exsanguinate is going to give you some value, although a pretty hefty cooldown. Toxic Blade is simply easier to play with. At level 100, Poison Bomb is going to be kind of your go-to. And before, Assassination rogues would go Crimson Tempest, where you can cleave damage to everybody else. But depending on your group composition, you can actually get other classes that are better at cleaving things for you. Yes, you can apply a little bit extra pressure damage to AoE, but Assassination is really good at focusing down single target. So Poison Bomb ends up doing that AoE slash single target capability. It plays really well into single target where Crimson Tempest loses out on, and it has a chance to proc on AoE as you're rupturing multiple enemies and are constantly applying Envenom when you're focusing hard one of the beguiling adds in certain trash packs. This is why Poison Bomb also synergizes really well with Toxic Blade, which is why you kind of want to go both of those together. You'll be able to have a little bit more focused damage, where other specs can actually focus on AoE. If you are, for whatever reason, as Assassination, the only spec that can do any AoE damage in your group is heavy single target, at that point I think it's even better to consider going Outlaw, because it deals with AoE damage just that much easier. Next, we're going to look at Outlaw in terms of how it performs in Mythic Plus dungeons, and what are the talents you'll want to run playing your Outlaw. At level 15, always quick draw. At level 30, you could go hit and run, retractable, or acrobatic. I like acrobatic personally because having that 3 extra yards on your abilities lets you teeter around bosses and adds where there might be AoE fire or AoE damage, and you have that a little bit extra reach, especially useful if you've ever done Freehold and you face yourself against the Shark boss where he does the Sharknado spin. You normally can't reach him unless you're playing Outlaw with acrobatic strikes, which is why acrobatic strikes is in most cases going to be your best option. At level 45, there's actually a bit of a good point in terms of reasons why you would want to run Mark for Death. It synergizes pretty well with Outlaw in the buff mechanic. It lets you get a buff in the opener when you're trying to get through ads, and as you're trying to clear through ads very quickly, when you're having to focus one ad at a time, especially with Beguiling, you're actually able to sneak in a Mark for Death right before the ad dies, land a finisher, the ad dies, and then you can continue on Mark for Death, finisher, and extra ad afterwards. Outlaw also plays around with cooldown reduction, so depending on the buff you have, you can actually get a lot of uses out of it. So Mark for Death is actually going to be the better choice, although in pure single target situations, depending on your traits, Deeper Stratagem could be good, Vigor could be good. I would say try Mark for Death, especially in fortified packs, but if you're not sure, Vigor is a decent option, although Mark for Death is exceptionally powerful if that's what you want to try, but particularly in fortified weeks. Level 60 is always going to be cheat death. I explained it as the same as Assassination. It's nice to have a safety net. Level 75, I'd say Prey on the Weak for Outlaw. The other two aren't terrible at all. Shorter cooldown on Blinding Powder can be nice in certain dungeons, although I can't think of a single one off the bat where you need blind on demand. Dirty Tricks is great because it will let you use Gouge without using your energy, so you can always gouge an enemy. Prey on the Weak, however, synergizes with your Cheap Shot and Between the Eyes. Part of Outlaw Rogue's regular rotation is constant stuns, and that's something that's unique to what an Outlaw Rogue brings to Mythic Plus. Because you'll always have a stun on an enemy, everybody in your party can take advantage of the 10% buff, especially when you're hard focusing certain ads. At level 90, Alacrity is going to be the best choice. I wish Slice and Dice had some play, but Alacrity right now is the top. And Dance and Steal is going to be the go-to in Mythic Pluses at all times. I guess you could go Blade Rush or Killing Spree, but with how many AoE situations there is in Mythic Plus, you spend a lot of time in Blade Flurry, so you might as well min-max damage, and it's not a huge DPS loss for single target, not go on Blade Rush. You'll simply just pair yourself up with other specs that are a little bit better at single target, where they can make up for single target, where you'll be able to support them with AoE. For Assassination, some of your best traits are going to be Shrouded Suffocation. If you can, you want to triple stack that as best as possible. The second best trait is going to be Echoing Blades. Increases the damage of your Phantom Knives and playing with your crits very well, so crit heavy gear is going to be very important in those situations. Echoing Blades is going to allow you a little bit extra value when it comes to dishing out big crit damage. Outside of that, if you need a little bit more single target potential, Nothing Personal is also a great choice. It's good to have at least one of those traits in your gear. However, Assassination does have a little bit of play with stuff like Double Dose, where you're able to triple stack it if you want to do simply 100% single target output. Double Dose pairs really well together with Nothing Personal if you want to triple stack that as well, but having a mix and match of a couple different traits here and there for Assassination, having a nice handful of variety is gonna be the way to go if you're not sure what the dungeon needs in the moment. For my trinkets, I like to go very heavy single target like pocket-sized computational device with the red punch card for Cyclotronic Blast. This one is earned through reputation with Mechagon at Revered, and you're able to buy the punch card itself. This does very strong single target damage, which can be used inside of your cooldowns or outside. And because it's 2-minute cooldown, it synergizes fairly well with your Vendetta, allowing Assassination to take advantage of incredible burst into single target. For Outlaw Rogue, your gear is going to be slightly different. You want to stack as much of Deadshot as you can. This one increases your single target as well as cleave damage, because it increases the damage of a pistol shot. Pistol shot can cleave while Blade Flurry is on, and this one will give you probably the most amount of consistency. Outside of that, Outlaw Rogue has a couple different traits that you can stack. You have your Keep Wits About You. Generally want one of these, but if you want to grab more than one, it can sometimes kind of clash against Deadshot. So Keep Your Wits About You is a good trait. Another good trait to run your gear is Brigand's Blitz to give you a little bit extra haste during your adrenaline rush. And maybe having one ace up your sleeve on your gear is always nice. It has a chance to grant you combo points back, which happens quite often, and it allows you between the eyes to deal slightly more damage. For my trinkets for Outlaw, because we're so AoE heavy on the cleave, we are going to be also running pocket-sized computation device. For Outlaw, it's good to make up some single target where you would lose it, because your AoE is going to do everything for you. Just remember to press Blade Flurry. When it comes to Assassination, single target, and AoE, we'll talk how we approach single target fights. Assassination is really good at taking on a couple different enemies, so like a 2-target cleave or a 3-target cleave. It does do some okay and occasional decent AoE damage, but it really comes down to your essences to make up for that. So when you're trying to, let's say, approach multiple enemies because you're running Shrouded Suffocation as your trait, you'll want to open up with a triple Garrote on enemies just so you can get Garrotes going, and you can start applying Ruptures on everybody else. Phantom Knives in order to generate combo points on more than one target. And then you just simply want to make sure that everybody's applied with poisons as well as dots. If there's an enemy that needs to be focused down, you will pop your Toxic Blade and you'll try to sink most of your Envenoms into that one target. Of course, remember to always refresh your dots whenever they are about to fall off. It's also a good idea to spread Garrotes around on enemies if you're seeing those fall off. You can usually spread Garrotes as like kind of, let's say you have 4 combo points on an enemy. Right here I didn't, but let's say I'm Phantom Knives a little bit more. You have 4 combo points left, you can apply a Garrote. It's better to sling in a Garrote just to make sure you don't over-generate combo points. Make sure to maintain Toxic Blade on whoever is your main target, and that's the general gist of Assassination. You can also do a trick where you go for a Vanish, so you can triple Garrote enemies again if they last a little bit too long, because the damage of your Garrote is going to be where most of your damage comes from. Outside of that, Assassination is pretty good at focusing down a couple different enemies, making sure they're cleaved, but the more enemies into the fight, the better Outlaw simply becomes for that. So if a dungeon just has way too much AoE damage coming out, then you might want to spec into Outlaw for a little bit extra value. When it comes to single target for Assassination, we're going to be starting on the Strain Dummy. Your opener is going to be Garrote. Actually, I can show you the opener right here. We'll just take it a little bit slower. Garrote, Rupture Garrote to generate the combo points needed. And then you pop Vendetta into whatever trinkets you have. For me, it's going to be Cyclotronic Blast, so I'll let it play. Into a Toxic Blade, Envenom, and now you're just trying to spam as much damage into the target as you can. This way you're going to have an extra beefy Garrote throughout the full duration of your Vendetta. Make sure to apply Rupture, and make sure to let this Garrote tick all the way through, all the way to the end, and try to refresh it towards the very end of it with your Garrote. And then you simply build up combo points with Mutilates and Envenom the enemy whenever possible. Make sure to keep Toxic Blade on cooldown, and that's really it. You're just kind of waiting for your Vendetta to come back, and well, most of your burst is going to happen in the opener, so you're trying to sink as much damage at the start when you can. If you have any kind of potions in order to increase your damage, that is where you would want to use it as Assassination. In a sense, you can also combine your AoE burst and single target burst as Assass in certain trash packs, like especially those with the Beguiling Emissary adds. For example, you can start the opener with triple Garroting enemies like you would use on here. 1, 2, 3 Garrote on this guy, and then follow a big burst on this last target. The 2 targets will still be taking a bit of a dot damage. You can also make sure to Phantom Knives them to make sure you have the poison spread on everybody, and then just continue bursting the main target to focus it down. That's where Assassination is going to be really good at, is at focusing down a single target. For Assassination, if you want to play certain essences, there's a couple different options for you to run. First of all, in your off slot, Memory of Lucid Dreams is exceptionally powerful. You can also go Purification Protocol if you don't have that one. In your main slot, however, there's a couple options. Essence of the Focusing Iris is going to be great if your team, if your group, needs a lot of cleave damage on multiple enemies. This one is also very powerful in general for the haste buff it provides, because Assassination plays really well with haste in general. And this one is just really strong. Single target or AoE can get through mobs, but also can do quite a bit of damage to a boss as well. However, if you do have rank 3 below the enemy, this one becomes a lot more powerful because you're able to play with crits, as Assassination really loves crits, because the more you build a crit, the more combo points you generate. The more combo points you generate, the less globals you have to spend building common points, and the more globals you spend spending them, whether it is for finishers to maintain your bleeds or getting those raw envenoms for big damage. Another option is decent but not super popular right now is Purification Protocol at rank 3. It deals a decent amount of damage, very short cooldown, passive allows for random frizzles for AoE damage, really good in maybe pure AoE stacked fight if you choose to play Assassination for that. If there is a lot of cleave going on, like maybe there's a couple bosses, and you'll be able to get a lot of value out of it. But also for trash packs, it has been told to sometimes randomly annihilate enemies. So if, let's say, you have a trash pack of 5 powerful foes and one of them gets annihilated, then Purification Protocol will end up kind of paying for itself, because that's an extra enemy just gone, making it easy for your tank and healer to clear through dungeon packs. When it comes to playing Outlaw in AoE, you'll always want to go for a Mark for Death and roll the bones to see what kind of buffs you have. Then you'll Blade Flurry and you'll open up with an ambush, Sinister Strikes, and you'll pop Adrenaline Rush and cooldown. And you'll just try to get through cooldowns ASAP. Make sure to watch out for the Keep Your Wits About You, because eventually you can just start Sinister Striking forever. And you use pistol shots whenever you have those as a proc, and try to use your finishers as best you can. Depending on your build, you'll always want to use Between the Eyes on cooldown, because you can proc those powerful pistol shots. Outside of that, Outlaw is able to just do very good AoE damage, whether it's 2 targets, whether it's more. Because of the playstyle with your Mark for Death, you are able to use Mark for Death in order to either reroll for buffs or get more finishers in. However, if you're playing Outlaw for single target, the rotation is going to be slightly different. You don't turn on Blade Flurry. That's really about it. That's the easiest part about Outlaw, but your damage is definitely going to suffer compared to your Assassination build. I'm gonna open up with a Cyclotronic Blast to get the damage roll in the opener, and you'll want to try to use Between the Eyes on cooldown when you can. Whenever you don't have Between the Eyes on cooldown or have a decent buff, you'll want to re-roll, but don't spend too much time re-rolling. Once you get a decent buff, like a Shark buff for example, or any 2 buff, then you're able to finally sit there and single target the boss. This one is going to be a lot easier if you have Adrenaline Rush in the opener to start with, since it'll help you get your stacks for Alacrity up a lot faster, and it'll get the rotation rolling a little bit quicker. In terms of single target, Outlaw is okay at single target, but where Outlaw excels at is single target with AoE. In a sense, because of your Keep Your Wits About You trait, you're able to use that extra setup for the other adds with Keep Your Wits building up to actually just purely, eventually, blast full single target damage into the main enemy. Everybody else is going to take 50% of the damage that the main target has, but because you're able to generate so many Sinister Strikes back to back, and then able to deal a lot more damage, you're getting 2 abilities of Sinister Strike instead of just 1 at a time. That'll give you a lot of value. When it comes to the essences for Outlaw, I find a couple different ways to play it. First of all, Essence of Focusing Iris is true and tried. I like this one for single target as well as AoE. As Outlaw Rogue, if you can make the full dungeon run as easy as you can with the AoE components and being able to DPS down beguiling adds while cleaving everything else very quickly, this one becomes very powerful. Outlaw is already good at AoE, but this simply makes us better, and you would think that maybe this essence might be overburdening on the what spec is already good at, but this one is still decent. If you do get Blood of the Enemy at rank 3, however, this one can be very strong because Outlaw plays very heavy with crits. A lot of your abilities, if they crit, it does a lot of damage, and you're kind of banking for most of your big spells to crit. So when those crits do 5% more damage during a big opener, you're actually able to get quite a lot of value with rank 3 Blood of the Enemy. Outside of that, I would say Purification Protocol at rank 3 could be decent, very similar to how Assassination is. In the passive, you want to go Memory of Lucid Dreams. The fact that this one gives you so much energy back and a small heal makes it first of all a bit more sustainable. The versatility it grants you at rank 3 gives more damage output and I guess a little bit of defensiveness, but mostly for that energy regen, allowing you to barrage the enemies and get that damage out easier, even in single target fights. So the spec never feels like it really ever runs out of energy. Thank you guys so much for checking out this video. Hopefully you guys found it useful. Overall, I actually had a lot of fun learning how to play Assassination, and while I'm not perfect at it, like I know Outlaw like the back of my hand here, I do find a reason as to why someone might want to play Assassination primarily for keys. The playstyle is actually a lot of fun, and I love being able to focus down enemies and always having that on-demand burst, something that I simply don't have as Outlaw. And even the playstyle for AoE, while Assassination isn't quite in the same league as Outlaw, it's super fun getting the setups and watching the damage numbers really pay off. I think both Assassination and Outlaw are going to be integral if you do want to push for very high keys, or if you simply want to give yourself as much of an advantage. Maybe you got into a 10-man group and it looks like they need more single target, or maybe you're just trying to carry your friends in a guild or something and you just want to give yourself as much of an advantage as you can just to make the dungeon run easier. While both Assassination and Outlaw can be played well for single target like tyrannical weeks or AoE on 45 weeks, being able to flip and flop between both specs if you have that availability is always going to be much more helpful, where Assassination already has a proclivity for pure single target takedowns, while Outlaw has that natural capability for mad AoE cleave burst. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I do hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and hopefully this video helps you guys, whether you want to push keys or simply just want to get your 10s done for the week. Thank you all so much for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see all of you in another video.